lose myself at the moment.
Was your father an artilleryman?
No. I'll tell you the whole story, Jen.
Okay.
I'm from the north, I'm a Yankee, and I like to talk.
Where are you from?
New Jersey.
Sorbet. Right, that's where I live. Exit 7 on the turnpike.
Anybody ever heard of that state?
We don't count South Jersey. They like the Eagles. I'm a New York Giant Yankee fan. But first of all, gentlemen, I just want to say that one of the things that is so important for me to tell you is how great it is to have you here, to have you physically here, back. You came back from that place and did the things you've done in this life, and the amount of respect I have for you and my family has for you. My dad was a unique character. He had some rough stuff happen to him when he was young, 14, 13. His father passed away from sickness. They lost their home and business, and he ended up in Hoboken. And he was a bright guy, and he hated it. He hated Hoboken, so he convinced a friend of his, Antonio DiPolo, who was 2 years older, or 3 years older, to borrow his gifts, his birth certificate, because you know they're Italian, they all looked alike, right? You know. So he takes Antonio's name and joins the army at 15, and went over to Germany, and that's where he met my Uncle Joe, who was my mom's brother. And my Uncle Joe brought him home one day, and you know, I'm half Polish, half Italian, and the Polish side, they're all big, giant guys, you know, and here's my dad, 5'9", 5'8", I think he was, you know. And immediately fell in love with my mother, and was in Fort Dixie, right, and would drive up and down to see her. Exactly the timeline, but at this point he either goes off to Korea or asked her to marry him and then went to Korea. And my dad served some pretty tough time over there, Master Sergeant.
What time frame are we talking about, sir?
Well, this is going to be the 50s, so 52, 50, I mean...
Was he in the Korean War?
He was in the Korean War.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
So, he's in the Korean War, makes Master Sergeant, survives, comes back. I got to say the Korean War is my weakest area of history, but he then did a lot of back and forth with the National Guard, and always had the military bug in his family, and certainly was healthy in a lot of ways. So ended up producing Frank, Juliana, Diana, Susanna, and then I must have been surprised because he has Frank and then 3 girls, and then he has me.
Yeah.
And he used to, I had found out years later, his nickname for me was the Golden Boy. I had really blonde, white hair, which is funny for an Italian kid. So I'll speed up a little bit, but I didn't know much about my dad, you know, and for me,
How old were you? How old were you when he died?
Well, what I was 3.5 when he left.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
I was a baby, and
Yeah.
I only have one photo memory of him, and he had brought an army truck home from one of the bases, and I remember him sitting me up on the tailgate, but that's about it. He moved us out of Hoboken, got us into Ramsey, which is a nice suburban town. And he did a lot of stuff, a lot of jobs, a lot of work in the later 50s and 60s, and always bouncing back to the military. It's in his blood. He wants to go back. And all my uncles served proudly in World War II, and so there was a lot of military in our family. My cousin Peter goes into the Marines, 67, goes over to Vietnam, sniper, good man, very close with me today, knew my dad really well. A lot of stories about Peter too, but so at this point Dad's like, I guess he said to my mom, so he's 38 now, this is 1968, 1960, just the end of 67, coming into 68, and you know, the way I understand it is my dad felt he knew this business, he had the experience.
Mm-hmm.
He
You're
could
right. You're right, that's exactly the way he thought.
And he could save some lives over there, and that's what he told my mom. And I had filmed my mom in this documentary, and she had sort of told me that for the first time. So I'm jumping around a little bit, but to compose my thoughts for a second, I'm 28. It's 25 years later, so this is 1995, 96. We never talked about it in our family. There's little snippets here and there, but you did the Jacqueline Kennedy thing, and you just took it and you walked on, And as a lot of you guys did, we took a lot of, especially my older siblings, a lot of CRAP from the world and the media and your dad and all that kind of stuff. Won a lot of attention, and I just didn't know who my dad was, and it was like chasing a ghost. And as a man without a dad, it's hard. You know, I got in a lot of trouble and was very lost for a long time. And so by starting to find out who he was, I could find out more about me and try to become a man and more like him in a lot of good ways. So I made the whole family do this Father's Day trip and event down in Washington, D.C. So we celebrated Father's Day for the first time in my life and the first time in my family's life in 25 years. And it ended up being the greatest thing for my family ever. It just healed them, and I started to hear things about my dad I never knew. And this is a little hard to say to some degree, but I know why I did it. I had, in my head, said if Dad came back, he would have been a bad guy, and he would have been tough, and it would have been worse, and you know, that's a defense mechanism. And a lot of my pictures of my dad were, you know, the military pictures in the paper, and you know, so it was easy to feed that kind of mind trip. And what I found out, he was a really good dad and a good man, and he loved children and loved to be with them. And
he was kind and he loved people. You were wrong about that military part. He was so kind and he would love everyone. He would volunteer for anything. And you're so right. We were 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. He was 38 years old. Yeah. And he came back. He had been there, and he thought he could save people. That's why he came back.
Why? So it makes my family's sacrifice worth it.
I don't want to, I'm not going to preach a sermon, but
please.
Jesus had something to say about men that did that. Excuse me, go ahead.
So my loss has been divided in a healthy way many times over, but what my father's intentions and motivations did. And you know, you go back forth and you think about why he went and all that stuff, and I missed out. And but I've never regretted his decision, and I understand it now more than I've ever understood it in my life, and prouder than him than ever. And I thought I was done with this. I thought I was done with the grieving and moving on and learning, and I was surprised when this came about, and I saw Dan's emails and docs, and just, you know, he's either kicking me up there again and compelled me to come down. So to go back to the story, planning to come back to Vietnam, my mom said he put me on the table with the map, and together we'd lay out the pins of the positions. And I'm so glad to hear so many things about him from you men and people that knew him that I have inside me too. Because I'm crazy, I volunteer for everything, and I love my kids, and I've always loved maps and history and military, and it's just in the blood. And you know, those things are important for me to connect, you know, to the ghost. I never saw a picture of me with him until 10 years ago, so I didn't really have any physics, you know, a sense of how big I was to him, and I was so blown away about it. I was a big kid, and here he is, you know, I was actually a real thing to him, and that was important, and now I know I was real to him, and so that ghost has filled in so many ways. Doc told me the story, I won't repeat it, but just hearing that story was just so phenomenal, just to think of my dad standing on the ground in his boots and in the jungle and at that moment, and it just makes him real, and I understand it. So he went over there, and he did his duty, and I'm proud of him for that. And he ended up leaving a strong mom, and she's the other hero. And I'll finish up with this. And she's the other unsung hero. I mean, she raised us, and she kept us all out of jail, and she kept us supported, and the roof over the head, and some really good people. And that's it for now. Thanks, boys.
Good job.